Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to Center for Policy Research. Outside temperature is about 44 degrees centigrade. Topic today is not really cool, but our speaker is cool. An old CPR hand, a good friend, visiting us after 30 years. You know, on a summer afternoon, a topic like this, a year ago, is like a sedative. Indo-US relations for decades have been on kind of autopilot. You know what is happening. There's nothing really exciting. People to people contacts, always fine. Some government issues, flare-ups like human rights or non-proliferation, some non-tariff barriers, all discussion among officials. But nothing really, unless somebody is an expert and writing a PhD thesis. So for the general folk, it's not such an important topic. But now, it's like a James Bond movie, or I would say Jason Bourne movie. It's very exciting, and the seatbelt sign is always on for the last 1 year. It's such a complex now. Now we need somebody who knows India very well and also United States. That person is Dr. Amit Gupta. Is a JNU student, went on to teach at US Air Force Air War College. He has security clearance. I can list out all the books he wrote, but one sentence is enough, which is his book, latest book, Air Forces, is on the reading list of Chief of Air Staff, Royal Air Force. And I'm meeting Amit after exactly 30 years. Earlier, when I met him every time, he was just a son of the great Sisir Gupta, our professor in JNU, who wrote a seminal book. Even now, it is important if you want to understand Kashmir. So, but in the past 30 years, Amit has done wonderful work, not just about security, Air Force, naval strategy. He also did almost a seminal work on globalization of cricket, how important it is, only we realized last week. So he has been versatile and very productive. Let's just welcome him. Amit, it's yours.
Thank you, Shyam Babu, for the invitation. And yeah, 30 years is too long. So next time it's going to be a lot quicker and sooner. Also, thank you to Anshuman, who is the person I throw all my difficult tech questions to. Like, for example, what was this evil plan to put the plug for your laptops on the left-hand side when logic dictates it should be on the right-hand side? Now, I asked Anshuman this question, I forgot about it. It tells you a lot about the people you work with, that he spent a couple of weeks looking for why it's not on the right-hand side. And when I got my first Microsoft Surface Pro, the first person I contacted was him to tell him, look, the plug's on the right-hand side. Right? We finally are doing things logically. And a bunch of my friends from my college days are here. And it's very nice to see everybody. It's more like a family gathering. General Banerjee and I have been working together and discussing all the world's problems for nearly 20 years now. So it's just so nice to see all of you. Okay, let me talk today about the US presidential elections in 3 parts. Part number 1 is, how do you understand current US politics? Part number 2 is, what are the implications of current US politics for American foreign policy, Biden's policy, Trump's policy? And part number 3 is, okay, how does this play out for India? So if we could go to the first. Screen share. There we go. Okay, before we start, I'll just get it up on slideshow.
F5 should work.
Ernest, I think you just take over there. Sorry. Ah, problem. Okay, just, Shambabu talked about the kinds of things I've written on. We'll just, that's the last book I had, which is Air Forces, The Next Generation, which made the Chief of the Royal Air Forces reading list. In the same year, I got bored of writing on security studies, which, as a professor of mine used to say, is the scholarship of the superior footnote. So I wrote the piece on the political economy of James Bond and how Ian Fleming was, in fact, quite prescient about what was going to happen in transnational affairs. Go to the next one, please. Similarly, you see one on Indian arms production, but the one I'm really proud of is the one next to it, which is Diego Armando Maradona as globalization's first sporting superstar. So this is the kind of work I sort of do, which is the serious stuff and the boring stuff. And the serious stuff is, of course, the sports stuff. To get to the next one, how do you explain what is going on in American politics? And the simple way to do it is to look at the results of the last two presidential elections. In 2016, Hillary Clinton won 472 counties. That's 472 districts, if you like. Trump won 2,584, but she got 64% of American GDP. Trump got 36% of American GDP. And if you go to the next slide, the gap becomes even wider. Biden won 477 counties, got 81 million votes to Trump's 74 million, but Biden got 70% of America's GDP. Trump got 29% of America's GDP. So for those of you who like to talk nuclear weapons and mutual assured destruction and all that stuff, if you want to nuke the United States, you hit the Biden counties because you get 25% of population and 50% of industry. What's left over is Trump country, which I'll get to in a second. This is the first major divide which drives American politics between the economic haves and the have-nots. Come to the second one. And you have to understand that this divide is not as wide as you think because the states can flip very easily. These are the key states that either Biden or Trump has to win in 2024. Arizona is 7 million people. Biden only won it by 10,000 votes. Georgia is 11 million people. Biden only won it by 11,779. Michigan is 10 million people. He won it by 154,000. Nevada is 3 million people. He won it by 33,000. And you go down to Wisconsin, which is a state of 6 million people. He won it by 20,000. So what I'm saying is the same people who voted for Trump flipped over in 2020, but they can flip over just as easily back to Trump in 2024. And there are good reasons to believe that that may happen. Thank you. The second thing you've got to realize is the spatial divide which is taking place in America. And the spatial divide is very simple. The Weldon Cooper Institute at the University of Virginia says that by 2040, 50% of America's population is going to be in the 8 states that I've listed there. You can take a look at those. Now, if you flip the slide, 25% of the population will be in these 7 states. So 15 states have 75% of the population. But given the way the American electoral system is set up with the Electoral College, essentially the 35 other states, which are going to be aging, sparsely populated, and largely white, may well decide the presidential elections because they already have 105 electoral votes or more counting. Next, please. Thank you. Look, what causes the division? One is economics, but the second one is very much demographics and this idea of a racial displacement theory. What is happening in the United States by 2045, which is not that far away, essentially 20 years from now, the minorities become the majority. They will be 50.4% of the population. The white population will be 49.6%. Now, there's other countries which may head in this direction, Canada, Australia, certainly New Zealand. But what makes this interesting is this racial displacement is happening a lot quicker than anybody thought, because the US Census Bureau had said in 2022, 50% of the children in primary schools will be minorities. That happened in 2019. It happened 3 years ahead of schedule. So this is what is coming in terms of the great divide in America. It's economic, it's racial, and you see on the right wing, a lot of people talking about, we are going to become a minority, to which my favorite chef, Padma Lakshmi, says, what's wrong with being a minority? For years, you've told us that nothing bad happens to minorities. So what's wrong with this position? I guess we'll find out. But the third part in this is, what are the ideological divides? And the ideological divides are quite apparent. Abortion, we've talked about, reservation, the removals of restraint on speech, which is what you would like if you're coming from the right wing, and the rise of hate speech. But, and this is the interesting one, because none of this is as clear-cut as people on the left or the right would like you to know. The majority of white women in America, despite the loss of abortion rights, despite the loss of reservation rights, despite a whole bunch of things that can go down, diversity, equality, inclusion, so on, they vote Republican. Since the Second World War, only twice have the majority of white women in America voted for the Democrats. First was for Lyndon Johnson in 1964, which most people think was a sympathy vote. And the second was for Bill Clinton in 1996. Trump, about whom we can sit and talk the whole day if you like, got 52% of the white vote. So when you get this white female vote, I'm sorry. So when you get all this talk on American news channels about how white women are going to come out and vote for the Democrats and so on, I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. And you can ask me why it happens that way. Thank you. Look, even though you have these divides, there are three things on which there is a consensus between the Republicans and the Democrats in America. Number one, both the Republicans and the Democrats believe that the international system should be one of unipolarity. We can't move to multipolarity, even though it's a reality. It's going to happen a lot quicker than you think. But no American politician can say that to his constituency. The second thing you've got to remember is the US has two strategic relationships, England and Israel. I'm not going to call it Great Britain because I still can't figure out what's great about that country. Okay? This is sort of, I suppose, any country in the world could call itself Great Tuvalu, Great Burkina Faso. Why not? You know, but if you look at these two relationships, these are the ones where the Americans have no restraints. And I'll give you two examples here. The British always sit in on any major decisions and they get access to all intelligence. Okay? Israel is an even funnier one because in the case of Israel, if you've noticed on the Gaza conflict, there's two types of American politician. I support Israel and I want Israel to commit genocide. Okay? The second category is people like Lindsey Graham and Namrata Randhawa, who goes by the alias Nikki Haley, who is such an obscene human being that she writes, finish them on artillery shells that are being lobbed into civilian populations in Gaza. But anyway, nobody ever says anything on the strategic issues that impact on Israel. And I'll give you one simple example. 2 Israeli cabinet ministers have said, let's go and use nuclear weapons in Gaza, which means you have nuclear weapons, which means American non-proliferation laws, the Glenn Symington amendments, should be brought into play. They never are. And when I used to mention this in class at the Air War College, I used to be told it's unpatriotic to talk about Israel's nuclear weapons. So much for the rules-based international order. Sergei Lavrov is right. Okay? Now, you come to the third part in this. If you move beyond England and Israel, what is the attitude of the State Department, the Defense Department, the CIA, and all these other people? And it is white people who drink beer. That's my little line for which I've been accused of, oh, that's so unpolitically correct, and all that kind of stuff, to which my answer is, it's the truth. If you look at how these people construct alliances, it is very much about a Western world order. It is not about a rules-based international order. And I'll give you 2 examples here. One is the Five Eyes, and the other is AUKUS. The Five Eyes is this intelligence sharing agreement, which is the United States, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and England. No Great Britain. No such country exists. Here's the funny part. There's 4.5 million New Zealanders, 2.5 million taxpayers. 4.5 million New Zealanders means it's 14% of the national capital region of Delhi. They get greater status in Washington than you do, whatever you may be hearing from the Ministry of External Affairs. Australia is 25, 26 million, smaller than the national capital region of Delhi. They get greater status in international affairs than India does. Ask yourself, what is the great connection? The Australians lost 2 people in the Iraq War. They lost 40 in the Afghan War over a period of 10 years, which is 4 a year. Most armies in the world lose more in training accidents. And the other thing is this really ridiculous thing called AUKUS, which is Australia, United Kingdom, United States, which is a security architecture for the Indo-Pacific. And my first criticism of that was, why is it 3 white countries are going to give Asia a lesson on what their security architecture should be? And the funny part in this is India was told quite clearly, you can't get an AUKUS kind of deal, transfer of nuclear submarines and so on. And the Australians took the nuclear submarines that they are going to find out it's hugely expensive, and said, we are not going to participate in the war against Taiwan, to defend Taiwan. To which then the question is, what are you going to do with a nuclear submarine? Probably run circles around the Australian continent, which looks pretty, but I'm not sure why the Navy would want to spend $40 billion or more buying that. Next one, thank you. And look, if these are the commonalities, because remember, neither Trump nor Biden is saying, get rid of Five Eyes, get rid of AUKUS. They're saying we're going to stick to this. What are the 3 strategic challenges? And Biden and Trump look at these very differently. The 3 strategic challenges are China, Russia, and the Middle East. But as Kishore Mahbubani, who's never listened to by anybody outside of Singapore, points out, you can only do 1 out of 3. And then you have lesser challenges like North Korea and Iran. The Iranians recently showed that they may be a bit more than a minor challenge. And if you talk to the State Department, if you talk to the Defense Department, they'll tell you very clearly all this talk of a 2-front war just doesn't make sense, because 1 war is a major war. You can't do 2 at the same time. You tried it with Iraq and Afghanistan, it doesn't work. Okay, what is the Biden worldview? His worldview was challenge China, compete with China, confront China. It's run into roadblocks. And it's run into roadblocks because China is the global factory. And when Trump slapped tariffs on China, which was followed by Biden slapping more tariffs on China, you had huge inflation in the United States. And if Biden loses the elections in November, it's going to be because I'm now paying 25% more for my yogurt, my bread, my chicken, and whatever. These things impact me. the other thing that both these guys did was they talked about rearming Taiwan. And the problem with rearming Taiwan is it goes against everything that the United States told China since the second Shanghai Communique of 1972, where they said very clearly that we will not interfere in your internal affairs, which Taiwan for the Chinese is an internal affair issue. Okay. The Russians and the Chinese will probably get together and push for the BRICS currency. On the technology constraints issues, look at the way the EU and the United States are cracking down on Chinese electronic vehicles. Yesterday, the EU slapped a 38.1% tariff. Only the EU bureaucrats in Brussels can come up with a 0.1% tariff. It requires a particular mindset. And the Germans went running to the Chinese and said, look, please don't take this personally, because where do the Germans sell the bulk of their automobiles now? It's in China. So they are looking at this. And Janet Yellen went to Beijing and told the Chinese, don't overproduce, don't do dumping. I've never heard of a capitalist state tell any other country, please do not produce more industrial goods. I mean, that goes against the logic of capitalism, at least the way I see it. Okay. And, on the Middle East, I'll say two things. Trump had done the smart thing, which was it got the Abraham Accords. Everybody was going to play footsie with the Israelis. It was looking good. And Trump's rationale for that was, if you can bring peace to the Middle East, we can then concentrate on China. Remember, you can't do 3 out of 3, you can do 1 out of 3. And what has happened is Gaza has led to a huge horizontal split in American society. Older people like Trump, Biden, and so on, with the exception of Bernie Sanders, have been very pro-Israel. The younger generation in America, which comes out of a generation of social justice, so on, says, no, this is wrong. And you should be condemning genocide. And this is a piece I wrote for the Clinton Institute in Dublin, talking about this. It's available online. Okay. Now, what about Russia? And this is the funny one. Okay. The problem, as I see it, is having spent 20 years working in the military bureaucracy, talking to people in the world famous State Department, the CIA, and all these people, is there's an intellectual laziness about Russia. And what do I mean by that? Look at how many people in Washington are still around from the days of the Cold War. And do you expect their viewpoints to change dramatically? The answer is no. I mean, how do you make a Biden think in a different way about Russia? This is the man who grew up hiding under a table because there could be nuclear war. So that was your drill. If you think like that, having a different view on the Russians is very, very difficult to do. Okay? And on the other hand, so you pump a lot of money into Ukraine, you fight the war, and this cynicism on this to me is, and I'll be very clear about this, what annoys me is you want to fight Russia to the last Ukrainian, and we do not know how many Ukrainians have been killed in this war. Father Zelensky has said it's 31,000. I think that's a gross understatement of how many have been killed. Okay? And one thing about the Ukrainians, remember, they're the blood brothers of the Russians. They would love the country to be united if you called it Ukraine. The Russians would have a different issue with that. But there's a cultural similarity there. And what they always say is, of course, the Russians will tell you, of course, the Ukrainians will fight well, they're Russians. But they took 31,000 casualties. The US took 6,000 in Iraq and Afghanistan. Watch the numbers. And 31 is the official one. I'd like to hear what your country's assessment is on what the actual number of Ukrainian deaths is. You can tell me in the Q&A. Okay? Sorry? Oh, you're too polite. Okay. All right. Sorry?
Not official.
Not official. But look, excuse me. The other thing you've got to remember about this is this is a hugely expensive war. Between the EU, the United States, Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, Ukraine has now got $300 billion in aid. And that's just to fight the war. The World Bank in 2023 estimated it would cost 431 billion to rebuild Ukraine. In 2024 March, 1 year later, they said 486 billion. Father Zelensky says it's 700 billion. Now, I'm willing to split the difference on this and say, quite frankly, that it may be 500-600 billion. And I asked this question in Amsterdam in February at the Vrije University. I asked this question at the Royal Air Force Museum in May. How many of you believe that the EU will put $20 to $30 billion a year to help Ukraine reconstruct? And I do have a slide if you'd like to see Ukraine's demographic disaster. And I think somewhere down the line, the West needs to tell the Ukrainians, hey, we encourage you to fight the war, we'll pay your reconstruction bills. There has to be a real serious template laid out there for this, okay? And the problem on the Middle East is, like I said, they have to come up with something on Gaza. Okay? And what they have to come up with is, how do you secure Israel? How do you make a Palestine? And unfortunately, I don't think there's anybody anywhere who can come up with a convincing plan on that one. To be very, very blunt about this. The next one, please. Thank you. Okay. What are the differences then between the two? Look, Trump said, manage Russia, have the Abraham Accords, and we'll focus on China. He raised tariffs. He put a lot of money into rebuilding America's nuclear forces, and he's put some money into remilitarization. Trump's view on Russia is very simple. The Russians are going to win, and then he can declare, okay, well, I told you this is Biden's fault, and he can go on with his own policies. He wants to concentrate on China because there is enough understanding in the American policy world that China is the real threat to unipolarity. Okay, and the problem is you can't do what you did with Russia during the Cold War. Russians build a Tupolev, you build a Boeing. The Russians build a tank, you build a tank. That's the easy stuff. The hard stuff is, how do you match China's economic global agenda? And that one is not easy to do. Okay, what are the implications for India? And let me go down them one by one. Number one, neither Trump nor Biden has any emotional ties to India. Trump makes it a point to imitate Modi's accent. Yeah, this is not known in India, but for the Trump fan club should go and take a look at that one. He's laughing at the guy. When you imitate somebody's accent, when you're making fun of them, you don't imitate somebody's accent to flatter them. Okay. Biden recently said India is a xenophobic country, which I find absolutely hilarious, but he's welcome to that idea. Nor does the American public. You ask the American public about India, it's still the same stereotypes. Gandhi, yoga, butter chicken, and I still am trying to figure out who came up with this concept of butter chicken, because nobody ever cooks it to any home I go to. But that's a different story. It's like vindaloo, which people think is Goan, and the Goans think was brought in by the Portuguese. Okay? There are no emotional ties, though. Two, white people who drink beer is preferred. See the Five Eyes. And the funny thing on the Five Eyes is Japan and Germany would give a lot more intelligence to the Five Eyes than New Zealand. 4.5 million people, 2.5 million taxpayers. Okay. Why is it the Five Eyes are the way they are? Third thing is, both Trump and Biden essentially therefore see the rest of the world as transactional. Okay? And by transactional, I mean, if you do something for us, we will do something for you. And then once we've achieved that goal, we go on to the next goal, which is, all right, now you do something for us and we do something for you. But it's not an alliance. It's not an emotional relationship in any way, shape, or form. Fourth part in this is the Quad is overhyped. Every time I go to a think tank in Delhi, Quad is like the flavor of the month. Oh, the Quad is coming, this, so on. It's not a Quad, it's a 3+1. If you take the Australians, the Japanese, and the Americans, they all have the same weapon systems, the same training, the same operational doctrines. You could take a Japanese officer off a Japanese Aegis class destroyer, and if he speaks English, which for the Japanese is a difficult process, you put him on an American Aegis class destroyer, he would function seamlessly. You cannot do that with members of the Indian Navy. The ships are different, the technology is different, the operational doctrines are very different. So talking about a Quad makes very little sense. And now the US is very openly talking about, let's bring in the Philippines, to which my answer is good luck. The other thing you've got to see is Tony Blinken is coming next week, and there's a lot of talk about we are going to do defense transfers. Okay, what are the two defense transfers that are happening? Which is still being, well, I know the Reaper is still being negotiated. So who knows when it comes through. The F-404 or the F-414 has come through. The F-414 is a 1980s aircraft engine. Congratulations, who bought the Maruti 800. Okay, that is the thing to keep in mind there. The Reaper is an expensive drone. If you want to buy a cheap drone which can deliver the results, I would go to the Turks and ask Selçuk Bayraktar to sell you some, or go to the Iranians. Those are pretty workable drones by everything there. The other thing to keep in mind, and this is from an Indian perspective, I haven't written this, both Trump and Biden are neutral on the India-China border dispute. So all the people in the Ministry of External Affairs who think that they're going to have the American president fall over himself to tell you how much he supports India, if there's ever a conflict, forget it. When Galwan happened, the president of India was Donald Trump. And Trump's exact words were, I would be happy to mediate. And last time I looked, when somebody says they're happy to mediate, they're saying, I'm assuming a neutral position. Okay? So I think you need to move away from the honeymoon, which really doesn't exist. Please. Okay, what are India's options in this? And I look at it this way, why don't we look at what are the long-term trends or the long-term challenges to India as a nation, India as an economy? And it's three things. First is the environment. 6 of the 10 filthiest cities in the world are in India. Congratulations. Okay, and 2 are in Pakistan. So the Pakistanis feel infinitely superior to India on that one. The second problem is education. Go and read, there's a great article in the Wall Street Journal, which says very clearly, India is not producing the people who can fit into the global economy, into the global workforce. The British Council has a report out on English in India, and they say whatever they're speaking, it's not English. You need people who can sit down and work functionally in the English language. Okay? My own suggestion, and defense, as I've told you, forget it. You don't have the money to buy a lot of the American high technology, like the electromagnetic catapults for the aircraft carriers, and the US is not willing to give you the technology. I was told this at the Observer Research Foundation. Why do we need to go with the Russians on space? We'll go with the Americans. I said, ask the Americans to sell you the next generation of cryo engines. I think the answer will be no. The Russians are already negotiating with you for cryo engines. So you have to see where this comes from. There are 28 items under Make in India. 29th is defense. Everybody focuses on the 29th, which I think is the least value for money, does very little to build up India. If you look at the other 28, the US-India relationship can boom, because it talks about environmental improvements. It talks about healthcare, in which the US is a world leader. It talks about tourism. Anybody been to Disney World recently? The biggest tourist trap on the planet? That tells you how good the Americans are at tourism. Stay away from the American aspirations on great power politics, because if you go in with the Quad, you will have trouble with the Chinese. And I'd be happy to talk about that. Before I get to the last point, I want to say this. There are 6 India-US relationships. Military to military doesn't work too well. Government to government doesn't work too well. Indian students, US universities works extremely well. Indian diaspora, United States, India works very well. Remember this, that $100 billion is remitted by the diaspora to India every year. That's a huge amount of money. Shaktikanto Das doesn't bring that kind of money in with whatever shenanigans the RBI is doing. Also, the last one is, or the last two are Silicon Valley and Bangalore, which is again a huge one. And one that is budding is Hollywood and Bollywood. Watch all the Avengers movies and see how many Indian names are there when the special effects part of the credits come up. This is the kind of connections you can do. These are the kind of things you can grow. Last thing I want to say is beware of lobbyists. There are lobbyists in India who are pushing, let's go with the American relationship. And let me say this, I go with Mindy Kaling and Padma Lakshmi because I think the Indian men in America have lost it. The women are teaching us how to identify ourselves. They say we are Indians, and yes, we're also Americans. They don't like being called East Asian Indians, South Asian Americans, Indian Americans, and every other name that somebody tries to figure out about them. It's the Indian women who said, we're Indian. We cook Indian, we eat Indian, we dress Indian. And oh, by the way, we're also American, get used to it. And people have a hard time wrapping their heads around it. I like this idea. I think I like to identify myself as I'm an Indian. I'm also an American. So I am very skeptical of lobbyists. And I would recommend to everybody here, go read R. Chidambaran's book, Memoirs of a Nuclear Scientist, where he talks about the Indo-US nuclear deal. And he says the Indian Foreign Service kept saying, go ahead, accept the American deal. But R. Chidambaran and Kakotkar Kaka, Anil Kakotkar, said, no, you're selling the country down the river. You need to have better safeguards. You need to have special safeguards. And what happens is Manmohan Singh wants to go with the Indian Foreign Service. And when you read the book, see the name of the diplomat who's pushing the hardest. I'll leave it to you. Okay, I'm not going to tell you. I like making people read books. It's the college professor in me. But Chidambaran told, what's his name? Manmohan Singh, he says, if you go ahead with this shitty deal, I'm going to go public. And I'm going to say we're selling the country down the river. At that stage, even Manmohan Singh realized what he was doing and saying and said, okay, no deal will be passed until you and Kakotkar Kaka pass it. And that's why you got the Indo-US deal the way it was. I want to end with the last one, please. This is a photograph. And this is why you beware, because there's a whole bunch of American lobbyists coming, Indian American lobbyists coming to India now, talking about what India should buy and not buy and so on. Does anybody here know what that building is? Sorry? Okay. The young man. Yes, he's right. Very good. You said it, right? Yeah. It's the Union Carbide factory in Bhopal. That was me last year. I went to see it. I said, got to see what this is about. That building, that's the main building which the poison gas came out of, is the size of CPR. Okay? And that's the world's first effective use of a chemical weapon. Because within the first week, 4,000 Indians died. In the long term, another 16,000 Indians died. And there's a piece on the Carnegie website which said the Indians should reduce the liability expectations and buy nuclear reactors from Westinghouse. I said, okay, I know who paid for your dinner last Wednesday. And my answer is very simple. Anytime anybody comes from the US and says to you, lower your liability rates, please borrow my photograph. And say, Amit Gupta has a question. Are you morally willing to be responsible for the death of 20,000 Indians? Okay. So to sum this up, it's a transactional relationship. It can be a very healthy relationship. Stay out of the big power politics of it and do what the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Chinese do. For the record, the Japanese, the Chinese, and the Koreans, their GDP combined is 30% higher than the EU. Okay? But the EU like to be the moral champions of the world. Why do I like the Japanese, the Koreans, and the Chinese? They all say we hate each other, but what greater joy can you have than making money off your enemy? They are extremely pragmatic people. Listen to them. Have a pragmatic foreign policy. Stay out of big power politics. You're not in that league yet. Yes, I realize some people think you are, not really. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to tell a little bit about cricket?
Oh, what would you like to hear?
Something positive?
Something very positive about cricket? Okay, two things. One, India rules global cricket, and so it should, because when India took over global cricket, it made people like Michael Clark, Mitchell Stark, Cameron Green, and people I don't know, very mediocre players, into millionaires. The Australian Cricket Board, the English Cricket Board, South African Cricket Board couldn't do it. You need Marwadis like Lalit Modi to do that for you, okay? That's my first caste-based remark of the day. Second thing is, cricket is coming to America, but it's not coming in the way all these newspaper articles point out. It's going to be a niche sport. Big four sports in America are basketball, American football, hockey, and baseball. Below that, there's a new sport called mixed martial arts, which is very popular among women because they also do mixed martial arts. And, the boxer is the better one in those fights, by the way. But you have sports like, I see the young man disagrees. You have sports like lacrosse, rugby, that are played in America by a lot of people. They're semi-amateur and they draw large crowds. I just wrote an article on this. There is now a Major League Cricket in America. BCCI needs to send retired Indians to go and play there. Because let me say this, if Mahendra Singh Dhoni goes and plays for the Texas Super Kings, he will ensure 30, 40,000 people showing up to watch a game. If Sachin Ramesh Tendulkar shows up for the Mumbai Indians, New York, you'll need the New York Giants Stadium, which seats 100,000 people to get the crowd in. And if you don't believe me, I'll just tell you one thing to end this. Lionel Messi was hired by Inter Miami. I tried to get the tickets to see Lionel Messi play because when I was in Barcelona, I tried to get the tickets for Barcelona versus Real Madrid. The cheapest tickets were 370 euro. I did not have that kind of money. Okay. For every Messi game in America now, the minimum ticket is $200. Imagine what the tickets would be for a Sachin Ramesh Tendulkar game. I will leave it at that. India rules international cricket. Be very proud of that.
Thank you. Floor is open. Yeah, please. Just a moment, just a moment. Get the mic.
This, my question is about the white women voting for Republican, 50% plus. Why do you think is that a huge figure, considering that they've traditionally been Republican voters and they've been shifting towards the Democratic Party in recent years? And
Sir, do you want to finish?
I have another follow-up question.
Okay, I'll answer the first one. See, the argument made in American academia is Republicans are daddy's party, the Democrats are mummy's party, because they're kind of touchy-feely and so on. Republicans are muscular and they like to wage wars. In actual fact, when you look at the demographics of women who vote for the Democrats, 80% of women of color, Black, Hispanic, Asian, vote Democratic. Republican women don't. They listen to their husband, they listen to their brother, they listen to their father, they listen to their Uncle Glenn, who you wouldn't leave alone in the room with the family dog. These are the people that they listen to. And 52% voted for Trump. This is after all the allegations of sexual abuse. This is after all the talk about abortion. Didn't stop anybody. And the argument is made. It's been made by two Asian American academics in California, Jane June. Oh, you read them?
I think you're pretty positive.
Yeah, yeah. And what they say is they're listening to their families. Asian women are not. Black women, no. Hispanic women, no. And in fact, the joke in Texas now is white women can't save Texas for abortion, so black women will save us. And black women said this is really a turn of events that you're looking to the minority to save the majority. Follow-up question, please.
My follow-up question was on the MAGA economic.
Yeah.
So, do you see any parallels with India, with the far right in India having a similar economic tendency?
Oh, you know, the MAGA is different from India. In India, I get the sense, as my friend Nuriel Rubini writes, he says India is a chaebol economy. Hmm. And there may be some truth to this. You obviously seem to know more about this than I do, so I'd be happy to hear whether you think Rubini is right or wrong. But look, in America, what is the economic basis for MAGA? Part one is the have-nots. That I used to have a job, my job went away to Mexico or to well, it doesn't go to Singapore, China, thank you. And it's never going to come back. Okay, that's one crowd. But the other crowd of MAGA is people who make $70,000 and more. So they're comfortably middle class. You know, and Pippa Norris and Ron Engelhardt wrote a book on this where they compared MAGA with Brexit. It's called Populism. I forget what it is, but her name is Pippa Norris. And Pippa Norris makes a very good point in that. She says, look, middle classes are inherently conservative and they don't like seeing the country move away in a direction which makes them uncomfortable. So the people who voted for Brexit because they said, oh, look, London is full of dark-skinned people. There goes the neighborhood. And now we have to listen to all these British EU rules on what the size of a sausage should be and how it should be composed. That doesn't work too well in Britain. In the United States, the MAGA crowd said, we can't smoke in a restaurant anymore. We have too many dark-skinned people in our towns. Let's go back to what we can. And white replacement theory is a very interesting way of putting things. You know, after Trump came, I started rereading Orwell. And I said, the true genius was George Orwell, because he talked so much about the use of language, how it's used for things like, Orwell wrote a great pamphlet called Language is Politics, in which he said, have you ever noticed that we go burn people's villages, kill their children, slaughter their animals, and we call it pacification? Still resonant, nearly 100 years ago. So MAGA is not just about economics. And I'll add one thing, they're very protectionist. They would like jobs to come back. Problem is, when you start bringing jobs back, the economics doesn't work. You're not competitive. Obama tried it with solar panels. The Chinese dumped the solar panels on the market. That was the end of Obama's attempts to make a solar power industry in America.
Okay.
Just one simple
Yeah,
question,
please
if
go.
I may. This is a straightforward question. Do you think the Pannoon issue affected the relationship as many were making out it be? And Trump versus Biden, how did they look at the whole quote unquote Khalistan issue?
Okay. Look, I don't think the Pannu issue down here, because you engage in a lot of navel gazing, you think this is a big issue. In the United States, I was watching the morning newscast. I never heard the word Pannu. So if you never hear the word Pannu, though I did hear the word Hunter Biden on multiple occasions, he was a far more serious issue. You didn't hear the word. It's something which is being run at the FBI level, Anshman. It's not at the policy level. What was the second one, sir?
That was the Khalistan issue.
The Khalistan issue, that's Canada. That's not the United States. In the United States, the only place you see a visible presence of Khalistanis is in California, where if you go on the highways, you'll see trucks with the Khalistan bumper sticker on it. And as I always tell the Canadians, you already have a Khalistan. It's called Vancouver. You just need to make it into another autonomous province because you're touchy-feely. They have Nunavut in the north, which is where all the Eskimos live. They've made it into an autonomous province. Make Vancouver into the autonomous province of Khalistan. Everybody will be happy. They can give like separate passports and send them out. and the Canadians will once again be the moral champions of the world. That's the thing. I'll tell you the dangerous one though, if I may,
Sure.
because your question is super important. A mid-level bureaucrat in the world famous State Department started in the last elections in Bangladesh to talk about regime change. Okay, now, how does a mid-level bureaucrat start to discuss larger foreign policy for the Biden administration?
You mean the Newland woman?
Sorry? Yes.
Newland woman.
No, the Newland woman was Ukraine.
Okay.
Newland woman was Ukraine. She's also a piece of work, but it's look, the point is this. How does Biden allow a mid-level person to dictate foreign policy? Number one. And number two, who's your most valued neighbor in South Asia? Allegedly. It's India. Did you ask the Indians, hey, what's your position on this? A. And B, given that India spent an awful lot of time and resources securing its right flank, it's worth asking why this was allowed to happen. Now, they didn't succeed, but that doesn't mean it won't happen again. You see what I'm saying?
Was it Derek Shaw?
Sorry?
Was it Derek Shaw?
No, it was a Bangladeshi woman whose name I forget.
Okay.
It was a Bangladeshi woman who's probably has half her relatives in the BNP in Bangladesh. But look, this kind of thing should not happen. Would Biden ever call England xenophobic? I can make a case for it. I guarantee you he would never say that. And your point on Trump is this, look, I doubt Trump knows what Khalistan is. Okay. That would be giving him a lot of credit. But the one thing about Trump, the difference between Trump and Biden is, if you want to do transactions, your boy is Trump. Because think about the potential here. You have Trump, you have Don Jr., you have Don Jr.'s girlfriend, Kimberly Guilfoyle, who, by the way, was sending me emails saying that if you're willing to give $20,000 to the Republicans, you can sit in a hot tub pool party with me. And I was like, this is even creepier than I've ever seen the Trump people get. And then you have Eric Trump, the one who tied up an animal and shot it and thought it was hunting. His wife, Lara. You have Ivanka Trump, and you have her husband, Jared Kushner. And of course, you've got Big Daddy Trump. That's 7 opportunities for cutting deals. Think about it. And go back to the 28 Make in India ones I said, all the Trumps are involved in those. Healthcare, wellness, tourism. You can put a Trump Tower up in 50 cities in India. Now, it still won't get you to beloved status. It won't still get you to white people who drink beer, but it may get you a bit more leeway. Yes, sir.
I recommendation of vision, please. First thing, rather become challenged to the rule of base international law.
Yeah.
Now, that's what you see following, quoting Israel for. Now, what's your opinion on this? I think it is a very, very correct line of thinking. If you don't do that, somebody else will have to pay, right? So you have to stick to the international rule of law to support the rule of law. My second observation is, in a society like US, during the elections, there was a poll gimmick. I mean, cheap poll gimmick, I would call it. They came up with the slogan, Black Life Matters. Black Life Matters. Every Black Life Matters.
Oh, Black Lives Matter.
Yeah, right, all right. Now, what's so funny about the Black Life? This is the White Life Matters. This is the Yellow Life Matters. These are other life matters. Why? And nobody spoke about this. Somebody should have come up. I've always been thinking all the way. Well, why you coin words like? I mean, the words like that. Why should be in a society, in such an advanced society? Why should it should be all life matters? You are neglecting the white and yellow and others. I mean, nobody spoke. In the whole world, everybody was silent. This is second. But third is end of selective immigration. This is my third observation. This may be the last. That is, if you see now, from the people from the South America and Central America are forcing their way into the US through Mexico, right? And they are coming in a wave, right? Now what about the selective immigration? Now the US so far has been, prospering on selective immigration. The cream of the world is going over there. That's why they prosper. This is one of the factors. I'm not sure all the factors, but one of the factors has been there. Now, what will happen if that happens? So, if they come in a wave, take over, what will happen to the US? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Please.
You spoke a lot about beer drinking whites,
Yeah.
but lonely browns, what they're doing right and especially what they're doing wrong.
Lily Browns, okay?
Lonely browns, you know who they are,
No.
Indians.
Oh, of course, yeah.
So where do we stand in terms of the way we position?
Yeah.
The US and Western Europe. It's of course US dominated system.
Sure. Look, on Gaza, I'll just say this. The rules-based international order. And I seriously suggest you read Sergei Lavrov on this, because he's the first person who said, why don't we actually talk about A, who coined this term, B, who agreed on this term, C, was there a debate of any kind? And he goes down the list and actually demolishes the whole argument. But I'll tell you this. I was in Amsterdam in February, and I told the Dutch, I said, every Dutch person I know likes to brag that they cycle 10 kilometers every day for grocery shopping. I said, your Prime Minister Mark Rutte could have got on his bicycle, gone from The Hague to the International Peace Palace, and handed a complaint about genocide in Gaza to the International Court of Justice. He didn't. Nobody in Europe opened their mouth. It was South Africa. And by the way, India courageously abstained, for which I congratulate you. But it's somebody got the nuance there. Look, the South Africans went with it, and the South Africans have got a lot of international kudos for this. Because the world said, finally, somebody's actually talking rules-based international order. And it's not Belgium, it's not the Dutch, it's not the Swedes, it's not Olaf Scholz, it's not Macron. So in real terms, what you have to look at with Gaza is there's a real divide in the world. And there are people who think this is a crucial issue of social justice. And I do want to say one thing here, okay? I think you have to make a big distinction between the state of Israel and Jews. Because if you look at a large number of people in the United States and Europe who are very critical of genocide in Gaza, it's the Jewish community. So you can't sit there and say all Jews are saying, yeah, go on Israel. Far from it. I am a member, my hero is Bernie Sanders. Bernie was the first to condemn it. He's a Jew, very proud one, I may say. I'm a member of a peace organization called Code Pink Now, and they sell no drones t-shirts. So it's run by a Jewish peace activist. So let's be very clear about this. Nobody is making an anti-Semitic attack. People are talking about it's time to stand up for the rules-based order. And it's very, very impressive that a country like South Africa, with all its problems, could do it, while Europe, which likes to give lectures to everybody on these things, is sitting on its hands. Black Lives Matter. I had your position that everybody's life is precious. But I have talked to Black activists on this and said, could you please explain why? They said, look, what we're saying is we're not stupid. We're not saying that other people's lives don't matter. Of course they do. And by the way, the Black Lives Matter movement has condemned the Gaza genocide and called Israel an apartheid state. So much for, that it's only about Black people. What they said was Black Lives Matter was our protest to the police forces across the United States that you cannot at random pick up Black men and women and kill them. And that is why. Now, unfortunately, what happens is we are now in an age of Twitterverse and TikTok. So all debates have to be done in 140 characters. I still like to read literature. That is why it got boil down to a very simple thing, which the far right in America took and said, oh, so do white lives not matter? That's not what they were saying. They were saying, why is it that in inordinate numbers, Black people get killed by the police? Okay. End of selective immigration? No. I have the slides, but I'm not going to put them up for you. If you look at the tech companies in America, the big ones, Apple, Google, Microsoft, so on, about 40% of their workforce is Asian. It's that high. Facebook, no. But Facebook was a dating app which became something else, the way I look at it. It's selective immigration will not end in America because the Americans understand one thing that the Europeans don't. You know, if you go to Europe, their idea of a highly skilled worker is a sushi chef. An American idea of a highly skilled worker is the guy who's going to build the next robot, which I put in the rocket to the sun. There's a qualitative difference in what is considered skilled workforces. And for that, you have to give American academia and American business a lot of credit. So it's not against selective immigration. It's, look, Sam Huntington said this. He said the wage differentials between Americans and Mexicans is 10:1. If the Americans earn $100, the Mexicans earn $10. Of course, we're a magnet. And if it's between America and Guatemala, it's 50:1. Or Honduras, so, you know, whoever else is down in the isthmus there. So it will happen. And there's been a lot of talk for a long time that the only way that you can improve this is by raising living standards in Mexico and further down the Central American strip. And
How
if
does
you-
one do that?
how does one industrialization? Largely education. You know, this will surprise you. The lowest by ethnicity, the lowest number of PhDs in America are Hispanic. Yeah, this is true, General Banerjee. You know, your son would know this. It's Hispanics. Their education, Sam Huntington had the figures on this. He said 4th generation Mexican Americans in Los Angeles have lower educational qualifications than 3rd generation. That doesn't happen with any other ethnic group in America. You always do better than your parents. That's the given there. So what you have is you have to invest, and people have said this for years, have a Marshall Plan for South and Central America. And that is the only way that you can do it. Look, 70% of Mexico lives on less than $5 a day. Compare that with America, where your median household income is $74,000. What do you expect people south of the border to do? And remember, Reagan liked to talk about the shining city on the hill. It is a shining city on the hill if you're sitting on the Mexican side of the border in Guadalajara or Tijuana or wherever. To Shambabu's question of the Indians, look, Indians do very well in different sectors. Tech, Indians are very good. The hotel service industry, the Indians have taken it over. The Indians, increasingly, the next generation is getting into things like law and Wall Street. Wall Street was the glass ceiling for Indians, not anymore. They're punching through it rather well. Problem for the Indians is they do not know how to politically mobilize. See, if you ever ask an Indian, what was your great achievement? I have a photo with Hillary Clinton. Well, Hillary Clinton has a photo like yours with 9 million people. Do you think she remembers you? But you have that probably blown up to a 20-foot photograph, which you put up on the wall in your living room. You do not know how to take your strength as a community and make it into a political agenda. And what they do is, this is where, when you talk to the Indians, I've written on the Indian diaspora and all about this, they say, oh, we're going to copy the Jews. The Jews give a lot of money to American politicians. Again, wrong analogy. If you go to New York, and I'm sure quite a few have seen this, you see Sinai Cider Hospitals, Sinai Cider Hospital, B'nai B'rith Hospital. What kind of names are those? Those are Jewish charitable hospitals. Go and see universities like Brandeis, which was set up because Jews were not allowed into Harvard. So they set up a university, said everybody's welcome. Hofstra in New York, everybody's welcome. Where is the Indian social philanthropy? And the answer is it's zero. Much as in India, the social philanthropy of the chaebols is zero. So where is it in the United States? The Jewish community realized a very long time ago in America, if you want to have a positive impact on America, is that me? Oh, damn, sorry.
You need some break, Manish.
No, I just listening, sorry. Yeah. They realized very early you have to have true philanthropy. You have to have some contribution to society. You know, we have a lot of Indian doctors in the United States. And I said this to the doctors in Alabama, why don't we once a month have a medical camp where the poor people of Alabama, who are by the way largely white, not black, that they can come in and you can give them some kind of free medical checkup. What do you think the response was? Nobody was interested in doing what could have been a basic level of philanthropy. And this is where you're not going to be able to compete with other people. And then this other thing, you don't understand the meaning of power. Power isn't that I had dinner with Donald Trump, which by the way, you can for $50,000 if you want to. And I doubt the food is going to be that good. I mean, you may get Kentucky Fried Chicken, which will be the most expensive chicken you've ever eaten. But the point is, how do you get Donald Trump to change policies? And the only way you can do that is if you can really mobilize to have influence. And the Indians don't know how to do that. It's really sad. It's
You also mentioned about ethnic divisions. It's not just Indians, Gujaratis, Tamil. That's a big problem.
huge problem. Sorry, I'll just say this very quickly to you. In Chicago, there is a Tamil Brahmin Association, a Tamil Association, and a Sri Lankan Tamil Association. Only one of those is a valid association. That's the Sri Lankan Tamil Association. The other two, you have to ask these people, what are they thinking? And then I was telling this to Shambabu. Raja Ramanna asked me about this because he said, where do you live? And I told him and so on. And he lost his temper. Raja Ramanna said, when these people go abroad, they take this garbage with them. Okay? So that's the Tamils. The Gujaratis are in love with the government of India right now because it's run by a Gujarati. So every Hasmukh Bhai and Hansaben loves it. When you get a Tamilian as your next prime minister or a Marathi, hopefully, you know, there's always hope for Nitin Gadkari and Devendra Fadnavis. My people, you have to give me some leeway here. They're not going to show up. They call themselves Gujarati American. And I had a very daft Sikh colleague. I said, how do you identify yourself? He said, I'm a South Asian American. I said, that's a geographic identity. That's not an ethnic identity. Do you understand the difference? But Sikh Americans call themselves, we are not Indians, we are Sikh. Seriously? You know, this fracturing of identities has to be stopped. And they're not intermarrying. If you go to America, I'm not making this up, guys. And my young friend here should check this out. They have a binder called the Patel matrimonial list, where every Patel boy and girl who is nubile is listed. And you can find your, Hasmukh Patel, Vijay Patel, Pepi Patel, Gangu Patel in it. And you can see in which city you want. Do you want a hotel Patel? Do you want a convenience store Patel, gas station store Patel? We'll find you the Patel you want. You want an uneducated Patel, an educated Patel. All these things are there. I mean, this is the reality. You don't hear people in the Jewish community saying, we are Ethiopian Jews, we are, Moroccan Jews, we are Polish Jews. We're Jews. and learn the good lessons from any community, which these people don't want to do. So I'm not going around calling myself a Bengali American or a Marathi American. I could do both quite happily. I say I'm an Indian who happens to also be American. Thank you, Padma Lakshmi. Thank you, Mindy Kaling.
You got any more questions? Yeah, please.
We have time.
Okay.
So 4 day before Modi becomes the prime minister third consecutive term, but with a coalition government,
Mhm.
will it affect in foreign policy? Rather 2 times itself Bharatiya Janata Party got a full majority, but this time they didn't get a full majority. So will it affect its foreign policy or?
Oh,
There's a Zoom question also, maybe.
sure.
Yeah.
I'll take that.
What about the looming debt crisis in the US? And
Ah,
what would that do to the great power status that the US has?
yeah. I'll take the BJP one first. Look, you know, if you want to be a serious player in international politics, then you have to make serious moves. And that has nothing to do with being a coalition government or being a majority government. And I'll give you one example. Since we're talking debt, which definitely comes from China in, the Chinese have $820 billion or so of annual trade with ASEAN. India has 100 billion. The Chinese have 760 billion or so with the EU. India is nowhere near that. You're a marginal player in the international economy. The Chinese had $1.2 trillion in US Treasury bills. Then Trump started calling them mother effers. Biden slapped tariffs on them. He said, okay, we can also play this game. They went from 1.2 trillion to they're now at about 770 billion. They've taken 500 billion out of the American Treasury bills. And what do you think Father Putin is thinking, given that 300 billion of his money has been trapped in Western banks? The core thing to remember here is you are not one of the big players. You are a player, but you're not one of the big players. How do you make yourself a player? You find the issues where people will say, my God, the Indians have brought up something which we'd never thought of. And there are possibilities there. Full kudos to South Africa. It's not a rich country, but it's a courageous country, right? India needs to think along those terms. That would be my answer to you on that. Coalitions don't matter. Half of Europe is run by coalitions. They have pretty effective foreign policies, except the Germans, and we'll leave them out for the time being. To answer the question of the debt crisis, it's very simple. The Chinese are not going to pay anymore. The Japanese pay, Belgium pays, Luxembourg pays. You can go and look this up online, who's buying American Treasury bills. But the Chinese are pulling out. The Russians will never put money in again into the United States. They've burnt their fingers. And a lot of people are saying very clearly, we're not going to fund this debt. So how do you pay for American militarization? And I'll just give you one data point here. America's military budget for fiscal year 25, which begins in October this year, is $850 billion. America's Veterans Administration budget, which is the pensions for Americans, military, and their medical costs, is $369 billion. Last year, it was 347.48, went up by 13%. This budget, since the last 7 years, has been growing 10% a year. Now, all of you have handled budgets. When did you ever get a 10% year-to-year increase in your budget? The answer is never happens. Okay? These are the two huge sums of money that the Americans have to spend. And who's going to pay it? I don't know. And I fought for this for 20 years, saying, let's have a sensible defense policy. Let's have a sensible military policy. Nobody was interested. Yeah. But as I get older, I've reread Don Quixote. So I'm like, being a knight with dementia, I'm just looking for a Sancho Panza. I'll be happy. But to sum this up for you, the money is not going to be there. And America can't take casualties. You want to see a war? Get the Russians and the Ukrainians to tell you how many people really died. That's how you fight wars. So please do keep this in mind, you know? And I just don't see this working out well for the US. I'll be on Social Security soon. I'm looking forward to this. I get a government pension for being old. I'm told that my Social Security pension will run out in 2023. What they mean is it'll go down by 30%. So instead of getting $100, I get $70. What do you think I'm going to do? Because, you know, I'll be in my 70s then. What do you think I'm going to do? I'll have all the time in the world. I will go and protest everywhere. I will go and vote in every election. I will write nasty letters to everybody. I will organize other old people like me. Where is America going to spend its money? Is there another Zoom question by any
Not
chance?
yet.
No. Okay. How much time
Any
do we
more,
have?
any more
5
questions?
minutes.
We've got what? Okay, 10 minutes left. Mr. Mukherjee, how nice to see.
Just a minute. Get the mic.
It's very clear who you have in the presidential election, in the coming presidential election. And both the candidates, you know, someone has health reasons for hopefully not being there. Someone is in some kind of judicial mess crisis, and we don't know what the end of that will be. What is happening in American politics that is not allowing leaders of other kinds to really come forward? Because over there, it's very clear, the president is a single person. And I cannot believe that the United States of America has only these two people within their political system of Democrats and Republicans to be able to lead.
Look, what the Americans want is a candidate that's white bread. Okay, white bread means totally uncontroversial. So today you cannot have a Franklin Delano Roosevelt who sat in a wheelchair. Today you cannot have a John F. Kennedy whose list of affairs probably stretched from here to the screen. These people are flawed candidates. So you have these incredibly boring people, except Trump. Except Trump, who says, I'll do everything, see if you can touch me. The rest of them have to follow a certain line. You look at Namrata Randhava, she became a Christian fundamentalist. Now, the only reason I like Vivek Ramaswamy is he remains an insufferable Tamilayan, for which I give him full credit. And nobody in the Republican Party knows how to deal with this. And Coulter says, oh my God, you're an Indian, I can't vote for you. What kind of nonsense is that? Oh, what kind of name is Ramaswamy? Oh, I can give you 1,100 names in America which are unpronounceable. This is part of what you have to deal with. The other part is you get the candidates you deserve. Take Trump. In his first case, he was convicted of sexual assault in a civil trial. And the judge said if this was a criminal trial, it would be called rape. In his second one, he was accused of overinflating his assets, financial embezzlement, convicted. In his third one, he's been convicted for campaign finance embezzlement. And the fourth one is election interference in Georgia. The fifth one is classified files. Probably be the next president of the US. I'm in fact betting on this now that he will, because it'll give me a certain joy. You look at Biden, the whole of the whole of America thinks he's senile, which is maybe unfair, but perception and image are everything in politics. The reason you cannot bring people up is Trump appeals to extreme positions. His extreme people come out in the primaries and vote. Nobody wanted to take on Biden because they said the greater enemy is Trump. So we voted on Biden, even though he had promised he'd be a one-term president. So now everybody's complaining we've got these two angry old men, but you brought it on yourself. And, you know, I would say this. At some stage, all democracies have to accept that they cannot, I mean, it goes back to the Zoom question, they do not have the economic goodies anymore to support a liberal democratic society. You go to Britain, their national healthcare system is broken. Good luck catching a train from anywhere in England to Heathrow. It'll take you half a day. And the British are the people who built the modern rail system. In France, youth unemployment is high. You can go down the list on this. Where are these people going to be able to push the kind of liberal agendas when you don't have the money? Now, if you don't have the money, you get the National Rally in France. You get Alternative for Deutschland in Germany. You get Trump in the United States. And once in a while, you have a rare exception, like the Jewish woman with the PhD in Mexico. But that's one out of 211 countries in FIFA. Okay. The rest of it is following a pattern, which is low economic performance. So give people bread and circuses. Too cynical, no?
Can I have one supplementary question?
Sure.
You mentioned South America, you mentioned Gaza. You said, why not some kind of a Marshall Plan to fix education and living standards, South America, so that you won't have the influx of all the illegal immigrants. Don't you see from Gaza to South America, in most of these countries, it's a case of state collapse. Now, what is the point in dumping billions there and a few dozen politicians and officials pocket it? And then what is the solution?
That's a good question. I would say this, you have to try. Okay. If you can get enough big corporations in to do industrialization, you then do get a certain amount of order. Now, your point is right, because if you look in the case of Mexico, the Mexicans have a strip of industry near the US border. The rest of Mexico looks like Mexico.
Most
And-
of that is owned by Chinese.
Yeah, and the other part in it, which, which is very important, is Mexico's having a civil war in which close to 100,000 people have died in the drug wars. That is a civil war by anybody's definition. So my take is, unless you have let me put it this way, I don't disagree, because I think a transfer of wealth is necessary, but it's not sufficient, because you will have to have good governance. Now, the only way you can have good governance is to tell people, listen, we are willing to give you money if you just improve some of the basics, law and order, so on. Would any of you like to see the demographic decline in Ukraine?
Yeah, I'd love to see.
You'd like to see that? Can I just? Yeah, I want you to see this. Because, and if you know anybody in the EU, show them this one.
The additional.
Yeah, the additional slides. Please just go down.
Pyramid.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, she's got it. Yeah. Oh, he's got it. Sorry. Yeah, that one. Just one up?
Yeah.
Okay. This is Ukraine. And what you need to know is, if you look at the lower left-hand side of the slide, that is Ukrainian population sliding.
What the
It-
years?
Okay. You see the peak there? The peak is 1991, when the Soviet Union collapses. Ukraine is allegedly at 51 million people. Before the war starts, the Ukrainians claim they're at 43 million people. After the war starts, it goes down to 35 million. Now, the UN's population estimates were that by 2050, Ukraine will go down to 35 million. It's already at 35 million. The new estimate is it will go to 30 million. Now, that's part one of the demographic. And remember, lots of Ukrainians have fled to Western Europe, fun-loving, hospitable places like Calgary, Canada, and so on. But if you go to the second slide, I'll show you something else. This is what Ukraine looks like in 2024. Somebody tell me, what you think is interesting. That is Ukraine's population pyramid. And the two bottom bars are newly born babies to the age of 4. The second bar is 5 to 10, and you can go up there all the way to 100. What is interesting about that population pyramid? Anybody? Sir?
The mean age would shift towards 50.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's an old country. It's an old country, and there are more women than men there. If you look at the median age in Ukraine in that slide, it's about 45, 50 or so. And if you could go to the next slide, please. This is Ukraine in 2050. What's happened? Yes. This is Ukraine. And by the way, these are not my figures. I steal my data from the US Census Bureau, but I like to give my opinions on it. This is what Ukraine looks like in 2050. The median age in 2050 will be about 55. And
Isn't it true of most of Europe?
it is true of a lot of Europe, except the Greeks.
Yeah.
Greeks are young at heart, you know, but the rest of them, no. Go to Germany, it's an embarrassment. You'll never get the Wehrmacht going again in Germany. But guys, if you look at that, their population is largely elderly. What does that mean? You don't have a young, innovative population. You're not going to have your Steve Jobs and Bill Gates who come up with Apple and Microsoft at the age of 26. That's gone from the Ukrainian equation. And a large portion of their population has fled. It's not coming back. They live in Netherlands. They live in, you know, not that many in England. England's not hospitable to immigrants, surprise. But Spain, places like that. This is the reality, guys.
At this level, you won't even have enough people to run the economy.
You won't have enough people
You
to
won't have
run the
enough
economy.
people to run the
No,
economy.
you won't. This is the tragedy. And just imagine, I'm a great believer in, as I tell the Europeans, when you go to Chinese stores in San Francisco, the sign says, if you break it, you buy it.
Yes.
Okay? So you broke it, now you bought it, you give the Ukrainians 700 billion in reconstruction money. Now, does anybody here think the Europeans will give 700 billion in reconstruction money? I think everybody agrees no. So this is the tragedy of Ukraine. And I have, believe me, I'm completely, I like the Ukrainian people. I think at one point of time, they had one of the best football coaches in Europe, Lubansky. Yeah. So they had a lot of things going for them. You don't know who I'm talking about? Valery Lubansky. I know that you may not find my data interesting, but you should know the football. You know? So here's the point. If you are Taiwan today, guys, and you're looking at this, what do you think about, yeah, we want a war with the Chinese? You would have to be terminally stupid to start one. And I just say this, there are a lot of alternative opinions in America on world order. You only see one consensus one, which is the militaristic one. Talk to a Bernie Sanders, talk to an Elizabeth Warren, talk to other people, you get a very different perspective on how to deal with America in the 21st century.
Can I ask one?
Yes, I think, please, very brief.
Anshuman, too. Yeah.
Go ahead, go ahead.
Can I have some time or just one?
No.
Short of time.
Just a small.
Yeah,
Okay,
short of
question
time.
asked.
Right, well, I wanted, just to make a reflection, what you have said, philanthropy and charity. So that never solves any problem, number one. Though about the black men issue, had it been a Afro-American who has done it to Chinese or Indian, would there have been any slogan like that? That finishes the thing. Now I'm coming over here about the theater, Ukraine theater. Why this place has been selected? Why this place? No, this is see, every theater has a history. First World War has a history. Known and unknown history. Causes, known and unknown causes, right?
Question.
Now this again, it's the same thing over here. There are known and unknown reason and facts and figures and causes. Now, those have to be proved why this place has been selected. I mean, this is a theater, now war theater. Why this place only? They could have selected some other place. Are they testing their weapons or they're doing something else or they're advancing their theological war, something or something, that's all. I think differently. I think differently from others. So
It's a question.
there's so many factors. Why
Okay.
this theater?
Thank you.
That is the problem.
Yeah, just one final question, which is, do you believe there's genuinely an intergenerational shift in the American electorate today? A tectonic shift in that sense, because from the outside, we get a sense of that happening. Because we are in a very different kind of information age, there's different kind of generation, which is much more agile and nimble footed. So do you think this is a new political framework in the horizon? because of an intergenerational shift?
I want to answer this. The nice thing about the younger generation in America, by and large, okay, because you can't make a complete generalization there. By and large, it's not racist, it's not sexist, it's not homophobic. It actually is something that looks at the future. It's the same thing with young Europeans. Again, by and large, yeah? I would put it this way. Therefore, I see them as the hopeful future of the world. It's yours, as my dear friend Nur Said says, if you look at your life as a 50 over ODI, we're in our 40th over now. And we're really hoping that the game goes to super overs. Slog overs. There we go. And hopefully our opponents are the Pakistanis.
Biden and Trump both slogging.
They're both slogging now. They're in the super overs. But to answer your question, look, Victoria Nuland in 2014 organized a coup against Father Yanukovych. And remember, all great leaders in Eastern Europe is known as the little father. Hence Father Zelensky, Father Putin, Father Yanukovych. The State Department never said it's a coup and we do not support it. They got rid of Yanukovych. I gather he's living somewhere in Russia now, happily or despondently. But the point is, there has been this idea that keep pushing eastward, keep pushing till you're right on the Russian border. And the Russians say, sorry, we have a security zone. And we believe our security zone is important. So Ukraine in that way is completely understandable. It's also completely tragic. And by the way, I repeat, they are damn good fighters. The Ukrainians, the average age of a Ukrainian soldier is 43. The average age of a US Marine is 18 to 21. Anybody here think that either the Ukrainians or the Russians fight badly? And what I'm trying to say to you is, this has been, in the 1990s, Boris Yeltsin was told we're not going to expand east. What happened? And people have a right to say, no, we want a security zone, a cordon sanitaire. So that is what is here. I think the war will be over in the next 6 months. It's going to be brutal though. For those of you who are readers of military history, the worst month of the Second World War was April 1945, when the Americans and the Russians had entered Germany. And then they saw what the Germans could do. General Branch.
What will be the end decisive?
Yeah, this one the Russians are taking. Yes. The only thing is, and we will talk unofficially. Sorry, Father Zelensky has 3 choices. He can go to New York and give speeches. He can go to Miami and live in a nice climate zone, or he can go to Calgary and hang out with all the banderistas there.
Or get killed,
Sorry?
or get killed.
Yeah, or get killed. But
Not prison or jail.
no, he's not going to be thrown in prison. Prisons are expensive for political prisoners. You send him to Calgary. You know that it's full of Stefan Bandera supporters, right?
One quick question.
Bully.
Trump's conviction.
Yeah.
Sympathy or hate in the election?
They love him. They love him. He's a martyr.
So with that, sir, please, I think.
What should be the minimum age of a president of a country?
We can perhaps take it up.
72. That's a good number. So with that,
Bodybuilder has come and he didn't apply his mind. He
okay.
should have gone for lucky.
So Amit, as expected,
Thank you.
you are very incisive and very provocative to some extent, personally, privately, I have irritated on some issues. We can talk about that, and thank you very much. It's such a
Thank you.
positive. Thank you.
Thank you.